اقتصادي. اسمحوا لي بأن أرحب بمعالي وزير المالية في المملكة العربية السعودية السيد محمد الجدعان، معالي وزيرة المالية في الكويت السيدة نورة سليمان الفصام. أيضا نرحب بمعالي وزير مالية جمهورية مصر العربية السيد أحمد كشوك، ونرحب أيضا بالمدير التنفيذي لمجيد الفطيم السيد أحمد جلال إسماعيل، ونرحب أيضا بالسيد جاك حيدري رئيس التنفيذي لساند بوكس اي كيو. العام 2024 والحرب في غزة ولبنان أدت إلى تدهور اقتصادي وعدم يقين. لدينا بلدان مستوردة للنفط وبلدان مصدرة للنفط، ورأينا ما حدث على مستوى معدلات الفائدة في المنطقة. من جهة أخرى لدينا البلدان المصدرة للنفط التي اكتفت بإنتاج أدنى للنفط في وقت كان النفط فيه ضروري لمشاريع كبرى وللتنويع الاقتصادي ولتقليص التعويل على النفط. إلا أننا في الأسابيع القليلة الأخيرة رأينا تحولات وقف إطلاق النار في غزة ولبنان وقيادة جديدة ظهرت في سوريا، في حين أن الساحة الدولية أيضا شهدت تطورات مع تنصيب الرئيس الأمريكي الجديد، وهناك سياسات يخاف بعض الاقتصاديين أن تؤدي إلى ارتفاع معدلات الفائدة والتضخم. سوف نحاول في هذه الجلسة أن ننظر في هذه الديناميات لنرى ما هو أثرها على مستقبل منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا. معالي السيد جدعان، سأبدأ الحوار معك. صندوق النقد الدولي يتوقع من منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا منطقة مينا أن تنطلق من 2.2% كمعدل تضخم في العام 2024 إلى 3.8% في العام 2025، شريطة إزالة الانخفاضات المفروضة على إنتاج النفط. ما هي تطلعاتكم بالنسبة إلى منطقة مينا منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا؟ شكرا جزيلا على هذه الصورة الرائعة لمنطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا منطقة مينا. أنا متفائل للمستقبل ولكنني واقعي في الوقت عينه. سوف أغطي هذا الموضوع من زاويتين أو ثلاثة. منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا لديها أعلى نسبة بطالة لدى الشباب في العالم، ونسبة تصل إلى 27 إلى 28%. منطقة مينا منطقة الشرق الأوسط وشمال إفريقيا تحتاج إلى حوالي 30 مليون وظيفة عمل جديدة بحلول عام 2030 بحسب صندوق النقد الدولي لمعالجة بطالة الشباب، والمنطقة تفقد حوالي 2% من إجمالي الناتج القومي، لأن الإنتاج غير كاف إن قارنا بالاتحاد الأوروبي. فالتجارة الداخلية في الاتحاد الأوروبي تصل إلى 60%، في منطقة مينا النسبة هي 8%، وهذا يريكم الفرق والقدرات. إذن هذا الجانب السلبي. أما الجانب الإيجابي فهو أنه لديكم شباب مذهل، طاقات شبابية مذهلة، خلافا لما هو عليه الحال في مناطق أخرى بالعالم. معظم السكان هم من الشباب وهم على تم الاستعداد لإحداث تغيير. تحقيقا لهذه الغاية لابد من التركيز على رأس المال البشري، ولا بد من تعزيز المهارات
and employment. They said 40% have a serious mismatch. So while we have unemployment, they still need employees, but they don't find them because of the skill mismatch. Which means if we focus on human capital, if we focus on skilling our people in MENA, I think the potential is absolutely high. MENA is the home of 48% of oil 48% of oil reserves sits in MENA. MENA hosts significant wealth of mining and minerals. And if you combine these with youth, the youth power, I think if you have the right ingredients to ignite that power, we could do wonders in MENA. In my view, MENA is heading actually in the right direction in 25. Obviously, there are some headwinds, but potentially we would likely to see a lot of forces within the region, but also our partners from outside the region, to seize the opportunity to make sure that what's happening in Lebanon will last, what's happening in Syria will last and be supported, and the ceasefire in Gaza continues, and that with the right ingredients of reforming governments, reforming governance, and utilizing technology to your own competitive advantage in the region, I think we would see a new region potentially. Is this going to happen in 25? I don't think so, but I think the potential for 25 is positive. I think 26 will be positive. I'm not worried about the noises that some analysts make about the region.
Your Excellency, briefly, how about Saudi Arabia? We know that last year Saudi grew by less than 1%, and this is mainly due to the cut in oil production. However, the non-oil economy performed very well. And now we have seen a downgrade of projections from the IMF for the Saudi economy. It was dropped by 1.3% to 3.3% for 2025. How does this align with your projections?
It doesn't matter what really the total GDP number is, to be honest. I mean, the whole idea of Saudi Vision 2030 is to diversify our economy. So our focus is really the non-oil GDP, and non-oil GDP has been growing very healthy over the last few years and will continue to do so. The last quarter, the growth is 4.3% roughly, and we are likely to see that growth escalating in the medium term. That is really the focus. I've said in a panel early this morning, GDP, we need to be very careful when we look at GDP as a measure for growth, because you need to look at other indicators. There is no point of having GDP. We can. I mean, this is actually a self-decided policy to lower our GDP by lowering our oil production. Nobody forced us. We can do it. We can do it today. And we will be in the headline tomorrow saying Saudi Arabia growth is 7%. Okay, the highest in the world. How is this helpful? If we produce 1 million barrels, we have roughly about 3 million barrels of spare capacity. We can produce 1 million tomorrow, and we will be the highest growing GDP in the world. How is this going to help? It doesn't actually. So what really matters is diversifying your economy, and we are on that track. You could see that in the PMI numbers, the Purchasing Manager Index, which shows actually consistent private sector confidence on what the Saudi economy is doing. You could see it in unemployment numbers, which is in the lowest historically. So we are staying the course. We are continuing our reform. We will make sure that we continue making tough, difficult decisions. If you want to succeed, you will need to make these tough decisions.
And we can see it in the number of the non-oil GDP, the share of non-oil GDP
Absolutely.
Of total GDP, which exceeded
and private
50,
sector investment, which is a structural shift that is very difficult to change. Private sector investment as percentage of GDP used to be around 16, 17% only a few years back. Now it is 24%. That 50% increase is not easy. Ask any economist and they will tell you it would require significant structural change. And it is happening in Saudi.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Noor Al-Fassam, if we look at Kuwait in the past 2 years, we have seen a contraction in the economy. 2023, the contraction came from both the oil and non-oil sector. 2024, we have seen a rebound in the non-oil sector. How are things looking for 2025?
Thank you very much, Lara. It's a pleasure being with the distinguished guests at this panel, focusing on MENA and the development that's we are all optimistic that 2025 is a promising year for us really to execute in terms of an ambition plan specifically for Kuwait. The government has set clear strategy in terms of implementation of the Vision 2035, and this is not just only a roadmap, but it's really a promise for the future generation to implement all of the key priorities and the initiatives that would mobilize the private sector. It would mean to result into a diversified and resilient, sustainable economy for Kuwait, and this would be also to the benefit of the region. The fiscal reserves and the balance sheet of Kuwait is very strong. There has been delays in progressing, as you rightly mentioned, in the past, but today I think there is a huge potential for us really to embark on a journey of execution with a successful ambition to really focus on driving the economy towards the right direction. And this, I echo Minister Jad'an about investing in human capital, because the region, and specifically also in Kuwait, we have 70% of the population within the ages of between 18 to 30. So the youth population is ready to be in the workforce. We should speak the language of the youth, and this should be partly because they are innovative, they are entrepreneurs. We believe that driving this business of having a digital and tech-savvy youth population is key for us really to be part of leading the next era of digitalization. And to also summarize what we're trying to do going forward is really looking at our ESG sustainability, rolling out key projects, including renewable energy, because the region, and specifically in Kuwait and the rest of the GCC, have the power to really fuel a lot of the projects. This can be done with clean energy, with renewable energy, and that could be coupled with digital infrastructure, building and capitalizing on the trends of AI and the data centers. And this could be a hub for the GCC to complement each other with our ambition to build the future for our next generation. And that would also mean the participation of the private sector with the government sector into a PPP projects, really making sure that we also have global competitiveness by easing the legislation and making sure there is a business environment that would invite foreign direct investment to really invest in Kuwait and build the momentum to ensure that we have a fully dynamic economy in the near future, and that's the promise.
What are you targeting? Currently, the oil sector constitutes 75% of GDP, and the oil revenues around 90% of budget revenues. So what are you targeting?
The non-oil revenue plan is ambition, because we would like also to engage in sectors that are promising. This would include building a lot of tourism projects, attract the GCC members. We've seen how the Gulf Cup was very successful in Kuwait. We would like to replicate this success story into other dynamic projects within Kuwait. The projects that we also feel would contribute towards the mega infrastructure projects. We had things underway in terms of setting up an ambition agenda really to increase the contribution of the non-oil GDP. Gradually, the starting point would go from almost 10% all the way to an ambition of reaching a level that's acceptable to the government, but this is really underway. And relying only on one source of revenue is no longer something that is acceptable to us as a government. And the starting point has already been accepted by the government together with the fiscal and economic reforms that we are putting in place so that we can ensure that the vibrant, dynamic economy can really continue to strive within the Kuwaiti economy, inshallah.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Mr. Ahmed, if we look at Egypt, 2024, at least the first few months were challenging for Egypt. You were affected by the war, which led to a sharp decline in revenues of Suez Canal. We have seen a fourth devaluation in the currency. We have seen high inflation, high interest rates. However, you managed to secure billions of dollars from the international community and from the IMF. Now we have a ceasefire in Gaza. How optimistic are you about 2025 and beyond?
Thank you for the invitation and for being with this great panel talking about our region. It's our region and we are very proud of this region, as said. And I think the success of every single country will contribute to the success of the entire region. I'm very also optimistic over the long term. But let me go back and address your question. And I have to admit that, yes, external environments have an impact, but it's mainly driven by also your own internal policies and how you want to move forward. And I think with some tough but needed reforms that happened in 2024, this was the right way of addressing it, and the right way of putting the right fundamentals back on track. Egypt, in general, is a very diversified economy. It's one of its biggest strengths. We have that. We have almost the biggest 6 or 7 sectors will contribute less than 50% of GDP. It's very diversified. We have very the diversification across not only the economy, across our trade partners, across our investment, across our export and import relation with the rest of the world, our current account, and even our fiscal accounts. So it's a good start. What we need to do is to maintain the course of reform, to maintain stability. The private sector needs stability in 2025. We're seeing early signs of strong and decent recovery. Growth in the first quarter of this fiscal year was 3.5 out of 2.4. This is not enough for Egypt, but it's a very, as mentioned, if you look at the details, it's a very healthy one. We're seeing manufacturing rebounding significantly, which is mainly private sector. We're seeing private investment recovering, growing by 30% in nominal terms. It recovered also significantly. It's now around 65% of total investment after years where we didn't see this happening. But it's also early. We need to keep it, we need to nudge it, and we need to protect this recovery. This is why we're putting a better governance. We're putting a ceiling on public investment. We ended last year any preferential treatment for the government or public sector companies. We're putting more, I would say, outcome-based incentives for the private sector going forward, whether in tourism, whether it's manufacturing, whether other sectors. We are putting clear KPIs, and if they are delivered, we'll be very actively helping with the incentive package that we have offered. But the bottom line, and I think what we need to focus most on, is to, beyond keeping the stability and the macro framework consistent, is really to focus on more export-oriented activities and being more able to export talent, export services, but also export more products with a higher value-added products, higher value-added activities. And I think this is our focus. We want to build our fiscal, trade, investment regime around those objectives, about how to enhance experts, how to bring more FDI that are more export-oriented, and how to ensure that we are providing a level playing field for the private sector to come and operate in Egypt very easily and with a lot of competitiveness. So that's our focus. If you want me to share some numbers, our estimates are that we should be growing this year at around 4%. Maybe the IMF have a slightly lower numbers, but we are confident that we can be around that number.
Fiscal year or for the whole
fiscal
of
year.
Fiscal
We
year.
work fiscal year, so I'm talking about 24-25. So the first quarter was 3.6. We're seeing also early signs of better improvements because of tourism, because of the IT sector, and because of manufacturing, which is key, and because of the oil and gas. The deficit is shrinking slightly over by the end of this fiscal year, but we are expecting that. We're expecting inflation to come down significantly. It should start be in much lower levels. It has been on a declining path, but because of the base effect in March, we're expecting it to be around 16% by March and to continue. So this which should open also the pace for normalization on the interest rates, and then it's another boost for the economy and for everybody, including the government. So it should be also a good boost for that. So we're expecting that. We're expecting to maintain our primary surplus of 3.5% of GDP, and expecting also our current account to start benefiting from strong remittances recovery and also from strong FDIs this year.
Some have voiced concerns about the pace of reforms in Egypt, and especially when it comes to the reduction of the size of the public sector and the military in the economy. And also some fear that the additional fiscal consolidation needed in Egypt will reflect on the economic growth. So what are your thoughts on that?
On the second one, I can tell you that and after a lot of explanation to also our partners and international institutions, I think Egypt needs to do more, but there is also a lot of ability to do more in a growth-friendly manner. It does not mean that we'll not, if needed, if we need to do some tough things, we'll do tough things. It's not about that. But the bottom line, if you diagnose our fiscal situation, we have a low tax to GDP ratio, not because we have low taxes. We have average taxes. We have a competitive tax regime, I think. What we need is to bring more to the tax net. We need to enhance tax. And this requires a lot of reforms on simplification, on automation, on building a new trusted relationship with the taxpayers, and also protecting their rights. And that's what we're doing this year. We're putting 4 or 5 measures that are almost in the parliament for final votes, that is trying to bring a simplified tax regime for entrepreneurs and small taxpayers, that's starting to build a new relation, that's also protecting the taxpayers' right, and that's giving simplification and clarity for everybody, and also putting a law that's trying to close a lot of the tax disputes and old files in a very fair and open way. On the second question, I think what we need to do is we did a lot of very good reforms. We need just to make sure that they are very well implemented. We have now a better governance, as I said. We have, I can tell you a few of those. We have revised our public financial management law, and we have a ceiling on public debt. We cannot exceed. We put a ceiling now on public investment, including everybody. And we are sticking to it, and it's helping. We are putting also, last year, we changed the law and we added a nice article where we ended any disadvantage for the private sector when it comes to taxes and customs. And this year we will be implementing it for everybody. And we are also doing more effort in bringing more governance for the entire public sector, including revisiting the general government and including all economic authorities within it. What we need to do more of is maybe to be more accelerating our divestiture plans and to implement this quickly. And I think this fiscal year, in the second half, you will see at least 3 to 4 transactions happening.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Ahmed, you were also affected directly by the war in Gaza through trading routes, through boycotts that affected many companies or in the region. So what can you tell us about doing business in 2024, and are things looking better for this year?
So certainly it's fair to assume that 2025 should be progressively better. I mean, we are coming off peak interest rate cost in 2024, relatively high inflation, devaluation in many of the markets where we operate, and obviously extreme geopolitical events. So 2025 should be relatively better. From a business perspective, we operate in 15 markets across Middle East, North Africa, and East Africa. We serve almost 650 million customers a year. So we have our finger on the pulse in terms of consumption and what's really happening on the ground. So we see a good return of consumer confidence and spend coming into 2025, which is certainly positive across the region. But I think here in this panel and the World Economic Forum, perhaps we need to look beyond 2025. And it's fair to say that our region has been trying to catch up really with the world for 2.5 centuries since the first industrial revolution. And we're now at the cusp of a new cognitive revolution, and we have a golden opportunity really to start a new golden age for MENA. Their Excellencies mentioned we're on the right side of demographics. We are square at the center of the movement of global trade, global capital movements, etc. We have strong balance sheets across the GCC, and we, as a region, are net beneficiaries of the energy transition. The cheapest barrel of oil comes from the region. The cheapest feed-in tariff for solar comes out of the region. And if you put all of these factors together, capital, energy, talent, we should be leading on the AI revolution. And that should put us on a path towards prosperity on the long term for the next quarter century. And if we want to put a size of the prize, if MENA region contribution to global GDP would catch up to our contribution to population, simplistically, it's an extra $1 trillion of GDP. That means for the businessmen in the room and women, all of our businesses would automatically be 2 to 3 times larger. For their excellencies, that's 2 to 3 times more taxes. So this is transformational at the sort of macro level, but also for the everyday lives of our people across MENA. This is higher wages, lower unemployment. So it's quite a big prize to go after if we can get the region to work together better, to integrate better, and to direct more investments towards talent development and intellectual capital development.
But what are the plans precisely of Majid Futtaim when it comes to investing in AI?
So we've been investing in data and analytics/AI for a number of years. We've actually been investing hundreds of millions in this business. And what we see, obviously, there is big opportunity in productivity, and we're reaping that. But what's even more exciting is the opportunity to create new businesses. So we just launched an ad tech business, Precision Media, that's off to a flying start. So we see tremendous opportunities for AI to improve productivity, unleash creativity, and offer us new business opportunities. But we have to be careful, though. You know, AI isn't cheap. The compute load is big. The licensing is quite expensive. So the bigger the promise, and we do, I'm not sure if you will agree with me, we always underestimate the long-term impact of technology, but overestimate the short-term. The bigger the overestimation, the bigger the hype, there is a risk of overinvestment in the short term. But certainly on the long term, this is going to transform businesses, and there are going to be big winners and big losers, and the big winners are the ones who are going to be able to invest at the right pace and the right way to capture that opportunity.
Jack, what are your thoughts on that? How do you assess the investments that we are seeing in the AI space in the region?
Yeah. First, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I think there's 3 opportunities I'd like to highlight for AI in the MENA region. I want to give specific examples from the MENA region. And Ahmed, I think you brought up key points. How do we make sure that investments are right-sized to the opportunity? The first application of AI, I think a big opportunity, is the productivity side. Your company, many other companies are examples of that. Beltone, a very dynamic financial services company in Egypt, is one at the forefront of trying to use AI now. You'll see a number of announcements from Beltone, I believe, in the next 6-12 months, using AI in a creative way in financial services in Egypt, but also they cover about 13 countries now across North Africa and other regions. So we're seeing examples of AI for productivity. How can we take language AI specifically, large language models, and how can we do things in a more productive way, cutting costs, increase productivity? But let me get to the second and more important application of AI, which is value creation. And so when we think, for example, about Aramco, we think about oil companies like ADNOC and others. We think, of course, they want to be more productive, processes need to be curtailed, but fundamentally, we want to see those hydrocarbons move up the value chain. We want to see AI, not for language, but AI for chemistry. right? And I'm happy to announce on stage today, just a few hours ago, Aramco announced that they've chosen Sandbox AQ, our company, with our AI for chemistry to start upvaluing hydrocarbons, but more specifically the CO2. The CO2 that's considered a liability now from the petrochemical companies, we're going to turn with Aramco into a positive product, upvaluing it to other carbon products that will be sold for profit by Aramco. What the minister has mentioned before is very, very key. How do we diversify away from just the resource income that we see today as being the main driver, just increasing production every time you want to increase revenue? Yes, increasing production is one lever, but now we have another lever with AI. We have a lever of taking the same hydrocarbons, but upvaluing them from increased revenue and also lower carbon footprint. Aramco is now taking a lead in that. I expect to see ADNOC and others also take suit in that particular pursuit. The third area of AI I'd like to highlight is AI for the public sector in the MENA region. We talked about the youth. We talked about, for example, to give you two examples, KAUST in Saudi and MBZ UAI, a special new university in the Emirates focused just on training people for AI. And in Kuwait and other countries, many, many other examples as well, of specific training to have a local trained workforce in AI. I think this is absolutely critical. We don't need to train millions of people, but each country to have a sovereign capability in AI must have at least a few thousand people trained locally. And I think some of the initial programs that we're seeing in a number of the MENA countries are encouraging. We're supporting them pro bono with philanthropic dollars as well, but we'd like to see more of that. So 3 core areas. AI for cost cutting, yes, that's table stakes. Every company, Delta's doing that, Emirates is doing that, everyone is doing that right now, airlines, so on and so forth. AI for value creation is the biggest opportunity right now in the MENA region. It's to take current products and upvalue them, creating new value. Biotech, by the way, also in that category. Right now in the region, in the MENA, we don't see a lot of biotech IP being created. Hikma was going to be on this panel, but couldn't make it. So I'll speak for Hikma if I can. Hikma is a fantastic company from Jordan. Born in Jordan, now a $5.5 billion market cap on the public exchange. Very impressive company to be given a lot of kudos for what they've accomplished, but a generics company. A company that has not focused on IP. With AI, and now we're talking about quantitative AI, large quantitative models, models built on chemistry, not on language. Hikma and others in the region could start moving up the IP curve, owning IP in the region. This is something that's a big opportunity to diversify the economies of the ministers represented here. I think the next 5 years could be a golden age.
Jack, given the rivalry that we are seeing between China and the United States, and these two countries are the two major players in AI, do you think that countries in the region, to achieve their ambitions when it comes to AI, do you think that they have to choose sides?
Well, I have a bias, obviously, given my accent, but I would say this. The first thing I think we're encouraging our friends in the region to do is first, build your own sovereign capabilities. Have your own IP. Right now, there's a lot of open source. Initially, we saw the initiative of Falcon in the Emirates to build their own large language model. That was a good, very good initial effort. But now there's so much open source from companies like Meta and others that are open sourcing very competitive large language models. I would say recently the CEO of Databricks, as an example, went public. He said, at Databricks, which is the size of some countries, we just developed our own large language model. We were the best for 2 weeks, and we got obsoleted by others. So I think right now, large language models now are more of a commodity that can be accessed open source. And what I would encourage is the MENA countries to say, let's use the best of open source. And from the chip perspective, certainly we see that the US today and the Western allies have the advantage today in terms of the advanced chips. But I would encourage very much for the countries to say, where can we have our competitive IP advantage in the AI arena? It doesn't have to be in chips. It could be, for example, in biotech, could be in energy, could be in battery chemistry. NEOM, for example, just to give you one other example, is now deploying huge arrays of battery storage, not for electric vehicle, but for storage of power. This is a big opportunity for competitive advantage. As you said before, the best feed-in tariff for solar right now is in the Gulf region, not in other areas. So I think this is a leapfrog moment.
Your Excellency, I want to hear your thoughts, especially that Saudi Arabia is investing heavily in AI and led by public entities, by the Sovereign Wealth Fund. It's estimated there's around $240 billion in funds in Saudi Arabia that are targeting to invest in AI, data centers, and smart manufacturing.
Few things, but can I just comment on some of what we have heard? I think my friend, Minister of Egypt, Minister of Finance of Egypt, is humble, not mentioning some of actually real, tangible reforms that they have done. And I think if we just look at what Egypt have done over the last 12, 18 months and on, it shows how real leaders can actually make a difference in a nation economy. And reforms alone, I think in subsidies reform alone, I remember reading, I think an IMF report saying they actually saved about $14 billion, if I'm not mistaken.
True.
So that alone is significant. So I think making the tough decisions is what this region needs. And the region has a lot of potential. But just going back to AI, I think AI is a trendy term. But if we are not careful, we could be, as Jack, and we could be left behind. And we need to think not about AI. Where do we fit? Where is our competitive advantage within the value chain of AI? And I'll give you an example, just one example. So generally, what do you need for an AI infrastructure? You need energy, and a lot of energy, preferably clean energy, preferably renewables, and you will need for that significant, if you are going for renewables, you will need a lot of land. You will need a regulatory framework that actually gives you permits very quickly and not wait 7 years like in the US now. So you need energy that requires a lot of land, and then you will need significant infrastructure in terms of fiber optics and the likes. You need a regulatory framework that protects these data centers, and you will need talent. So I'll talk about Saudi Arabia. For Saudi Arabia, we have the cheapest, literally the cheapest renewables in the world is produced in Saudi Arabia. Solar power in Saudi Arabia is the cheapest, and it's actually influencing what is happening everywhere else in the world. We have, definitely, if you visited Saudi Arabia, we have ample land. So we have nothing to worry about, and it is owned by the government, so licensing can happen in a very short period of time. And we have a very flexible, actually very agile government policy that would allow licensing to be happening very quickly, and a regulatory framework that will protect the data within a data center. And I think the key worry is, if you go and ask the Europeans or the Americans, why are you not locating your data centers in other regions? It's a sovereign worry about the data protection. And I think if you put a regulatory framework around it, which we are doing at the moment, where we will treat basically this data center as the Belgium embassy and the US embassy and the UK embassy, Egypt embassy, then it is protected, okay? So what we are using our competitive advantage. So, and the jargon that I use is, instead of actually exporting oil, we will export data. We will export this ability. So we don't need to export energy to them. They can use the energy where it is in Saudi Arabia, but then they can export their data. So that's one part. The second is talents. And I'll give you two examples and I'll stop for the sake of time. Who is the number one cybersecurity ranking in the world? Number one government or country in the world in cybersecurity. You could guess a lot, but I can tell you it's Saudi Arabia. And this is not our ranking, it's an international ranking. And the second part is, what is the percentage of Saudi talents who are actually handling, operating, managing, programming, coding all of our cybersecurity? 100%, literally. 100% Saudi talents. Right? So, and we invested a lot in, I mean, both are calling for that. We invested a lot in actually training our talents and taking and jumping in the opportunity of these trends in making sure that our talents are actually ready to take that opportunity. Are we there yet? No, we are not. I think there is ample opportunities to catch, and there is a long way to go to harness the full potential, including in the government, in the business sides, and the individuals within the society.
And that's why we have seen an establishment of a cybersecurity center with the World Economic Forum with Saudi Arabia. So we have, our time is up, unfortunately. There's a lot to talk about, but I would like to hear your thoughts, all of you, on one thing. We came to Davos and we have seen the Global Risks Report for 2025. In the survey, the top risks that were identified in that report are three. Number one is state-based armed conflict. Number two, extreme weather events. And number three is geoeconomic confrontation. So what do you think are
I will
the...
yield my time to Your Excellency and then go. I took too much time. Please,
Your Excellency, what is the top global risk, in your opinion, for 2025?
I think the geoeconomic confrontation is something of great importance to tackle. We come to Davos in the World Economic Forum here really to acknowledge all of these challenges and all of these risks and come up with solutions to overcome all of these important challenges that not only the MENA region faces, but the world. Climate change is something of importance. Even when we speak about AI and the risks that's relevant to AI, I think it's very important for us really to utilize AI and to deploy it towards the growth of the economies and the local economies as well, and really for the benefit of the human race. I think this is really the objective of governments, corporates and businesses to work hand in hand to deploy all of these matters into the right direction for the benefit of our nations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency.
Well, I will be very short, and I might not pick from the list, but I would tell you that what I'm personally, and I think a lot of people I speak with are a bit concerned about, is collective effort or collective action where every country look inward instead of outward and lead to confrontation, not of collaboration. And I think this is what I think is a big risk for the global economy if everybody only look at his own internal. It's very important. We all work to serve our countries and people, but just be overly looking inside without having an outward-looking views. I think if it collectively is done, can be very damaging for everybody. So I think this is something that I'm a bit. I would put it as a top risk if we went into that direction.
Ahmed, what are your thoughts? What worries you the most for this year?
So I'm always reluctant to predict the weather or try to predict politics. So I wouldn't also pick from the list. I think that the biggest risk is the risk of missed opportunities, especially for the MENA region. There is tremendous reform investments that are happening at the national level. I think the biggest missed opportunity if we don't drive enough regional cooperation and integration to unleash the full potential of MENA. I think that for me would be the biggest risk that we need to keep top of our minds.
Thank you, Ahmed. Jack.
Now, what I would say is, no matter what risk you want to think about, the best way to prepare for it is to be resilient and diversified. And what I would love to see, we would love to see more in the MENA region, is diversification continued and strengthened from just resource intensity to resource plus IP intensity across a diverse set of sectors, be it finance, be it energy, be it biotech and others. This resiliency and diversification is the best way to handle any of the risks. And so hopefully we can be partners in making this happen.
Thank you, Jack, Your Excellency.
No, I think I am not as worried about fragmentation, and I think wisdom would prevail. People realize that if you go the route of fragmentation and inward looking, it is bad for everybody. And cooperation is not a charity. Cooperation is self-interest and will help everybody's economy. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing your thoughts and your valuable insights with us today. And thank
you.
you for your attention.